I'm in the garage right now working on some of my archery stuff, and there's a topic that's been weighing on my mind a lot lately, and it's these traditional gender roles that used to be valued a lot more, you know, 50, 60 years ago. And over the years, they've just gotten more diluted and more diluted. And I had a friend and his wife come over, their family come over last night for dinner. And his wife, she's younger. I think there's like a 10-year gap between them. He's closer to my age, and she's in her late 20s, 26, 27, something like that. And she had recently discovered about how bad birth control is for women, for their hormones and stuff like that, and was talking about getting her IUD taken out. And my buddy started joking about how she's going to end up pregnant uh, right away. And, they had talked about wanting to have more kids, but she had mentioned wanting to start her career first. And I couldn't help but say, your career should be being a mom. And, these are values that we used to take more serious. And, the men were the providers and the protectors, and the women looked after the kids and raised them up to grow up to be the next generation of, responsible women and men. And these values weren't, growing up, the waters, just like I said, kept getting muddier and muddier, and women were encouraged more to go out and start a career and go to college and all these things. And I just thought that's how life was. I never really I never really thought about marriage and starting a family. I was just more consumed with just going out and partying and, sleeping with as many women as I could. And it was something that wasn't really prevalent in like my friend group. And it could be, the lack of religion, religious values that's another thing that's becoming real prevalent, is a lot less people, at least my generation, families were a lot, weren't as religious as previous generations were. But I think these values are super important, and I wish I had taking that more serious growing up and was encouraged more to become the provider and protector. When I first met my wife, it was really obvious from the very beginning that her whole focus in life was to become a mother. And, having a single income household is another thing that's become harder and harder to obtain. And like most of us, she ended up in the workforce, and now she's the boss lady, the boss babe that seems to be the main focus of a lot of this next generation's values. And I had a argument the other day with my older son about some things. And his main focus right now is becoming rich. I'm going to be, by the time I'm 25, I'm going to be sitting in my mansion, blah 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 blah. And I wish his main focus was to become a father, to start a family. I wish it wasn't to become super rich. You can have a family and, have a, modest job and be successful. And it's just got me thinking a lot more about what we're encouraging and teaching these next generations of kids. You know, for one, I think we need to be pushing more just religious views, you know, taking the gender roles a little more seriously. I think we need to be encouraging men to man up and become providers and protectors, and women to raise the next generation, you know, have babies and become the next generation of we have a really birth decline right now is at an all-time low. I think it's 1.6 kids per family, per woman, and it's just not sustainable. You know, there's going to be no one there to take care of the elderly, like my generation. Once we get old, there's, you know, a lot of people aren't having kids, and it's scary. It's sad. You know, these young ladies, young women hold the most college debt, you know, so they're entering these, you know, eventually when they decide at 30, 35 years old to settle down and have, get a husband and have kids and stuff, they got tons of debt. They're not even using their college degree. And it's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And I really wish that I had made a lot of different decisions, you know, having my third son at 40 years old, and just kind of seeing the dynamic in my household right now. You know, my wife's, you know, that boss babe. She's, you know, the manager of, you know, she manages a whole team of people, and she's constantly on the phone and constantly in meetings, and I'm constantly having to get the kid and keep him quiet so she can deal with X, Y, and Z. And I really wish the roles were reversed right now. And I wish that I was the main source of the financial income, and she was focusing more on just being a mom. And these are all my bad decisions and all my terrible values that I've held for so long. And a lot of it, you know, is taught to these young women too, you know, to go out and get a degree and become this boss babe, and you don't need no man, you can do this on your own. And all of those things can be true, and you can have, you know, a job or a career. I just think you should start a family first. You know, women's, you know, from their 20s to their early 30s are the prime years for them to have kids and become a mother, and they're being wasted in college, in meaningless relationships with boys. We have this really ugly hookup culture right now where, you know, this online dating space, and, you know, even like this red pill space that's been going on, all these Andrew Tates and Wes Watsons and these clowns that preach about just being these alpha males and making a bunch of money and driving fast, you know, Bugattis, and treating women like objects is not all bad. You know, teaching men to man up and be men, and, you know, work out and take life serious and take, you know, making money serious is fine. It's good. But teaching them that, you know, women are objects, and, you know, sleep as many women as you want, and your goal should be to get a big house and a fast car instead of starting a family and finding a good woman to settle down with, it's really unfortunate. And I'm guilty of falling into that trap as well. I mean, I was never really focused on being rich and driving fast cars or nothing like that. I still don't give a shit about any of those things. But I was guilty of, you know, falling into that hookup culture and meaningless relationships with women and stuff. You know, obviously my wife and I, we just celebrated our 13th year married. We've been together over 21 years, I think. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not. I mean, I did I did get married and I did start a family and stuff, but I was still pretty selfish for a really long time. It wasn't up until recently, you know, I was so focused on wanting to have fun, and I was, you know, spoiled little brat, and you know, I made money to buy bass boats and fishing rods and archery equipment. You know, this damn thing right here, $1,000 into a sight for my bow, instead of focusing on, you know, my son's baseball, you know, more, or, you know, just focusing more on the family. And over the last couple of months, a lot of my focus and like the content I'm consuming, you know, as far as like Christian apologetics and more of this starting a family and taking family a lot more serious. You know, my views on all this stuff have changed drastically, and I can't change what I've done up until this point, but I can change what I'm going to do going forward and the things that I want to, you know, teach my, you know, I still have 2 younger sons, and just try to help this next generation of young men become men and find value in starting a family and finding a good wife. And I think you know, the female content creators that are making various content, instead of teaching them to make $1 million on OnlyFans, you should be teaching them how to be a mom, you know, or encouraging them to be a mom. And, you know, those values, I think, need to be expressed more deeply in this culture we find ourselves in now. And I'm gonna try to make a big change in the content I've been putting out. You know, a lot of this is, you know, all the pitfalls and all the mistakes and everything I've made over all these years. And I think hopefully someone gets some, you know, learn some lessons out of all the mistakes that I've made, and maybe see that you can make a change. It's never too late to make a change. And it wasn't worth it. You know, I had a ton of fun, but there's so much heartache and so much regret and so much guilt that I live with every day. And I wish I had made different decisions. And instead of just wallowing in the guilt, I need to be more productive in shifting the culture in a different direction. So I think that's what I'm going to do from here on out. And I hope some people get some value out of this, and maybe learn some of the lessons that some of the mistakes that I've made. Definitely. I'm going to end this video right there. I got to get back to work.